In the span of a single sunrise, compasses stop pointing north. Air traffic controllers reroute flights. The sky over Cairo turns the color of electric mint. On the International Space Station, alarms blossom red as radiation climbs. And around the world, the invisible shield that made civilization possible just switched off. Beneath your feet, about 2,000 kilometers down, the outer core of the Earth is a sea of liquid iron moving like weather. This flow, stirred by the rotation and heat from the inner core, creates a geomagnetic generator, a gigantic magnetic field extending dozens of Earth's radii into space. The protective bubble it carves against the solar wind is called the magnetosphere. Day 1. The sky shattered. The magnetic field vanished, and solar winds directly struck the atmosphere. High-energy particles poured into the upper layers, supercharging the ionosphere. Auroras were no longer confined to the poles. They painted the entire planet, Miami, Mumbai, Melbourne, with neon curtains of light swaying from horizon to horizon. Day 2 to 3. The invisible storm. Although there is no major solar storm, the background particle levels are now much higher. The thermosphere is heating up and expanding, increasing air resistance on low Earth orbit satellites. Orbits are beginning to degrade rapidly. Command centers are preparing early avoidance burns. Low-frequency radio waves bouncing off the ionosphere are behaving erratically. In some areas, signals are lost, while in others, strange long-range effects are appearing. Aircraft ground communication is deteriorating, forcing reliance on line-of-sight systems. Maritime operations still using beacons are also facing significant challenges. Meanwhile, long conductors on the ground, power lines and pipelines, are becoming vulnerable to geomagnetic-induced currents, or GIC. This time not due to the magnetosphere's fluctuations, but because of the massive currents flowing in the ionosphere as solar wind strikes directly. Grid operators are switching to defensive mode, balancing loads, monitoring transformers, and in some areas, implementing controlled power outages to prevent equipment damage. Montage of the animal world. A confused flock of geese swirling around, a sea turtle lingering offshore, a pod of whales changing direction. Narrator. These species that can read the whispers of Earth's magnetism have lost their map. They can still follow the stars and the coastline, but their internal compass has fallen silent. Days 4 to 5. The chemistry of the unshielded sky. High-energy particles penetrate deeper into the atmosphere, catalyzing reactions in the stratosphere. Nitrogen oxides form and erode ozone. Within just a few days, damage appears in a patchy but measurable manner, especially at mid and high latitudes. UVB reaching the ground increases slightly, still modest for most, but enough for health authorities to issue warnings. Apply sunscreen throughout the winter, enhance protection for outdoor workers, and remind airlines to continue lower flight paths on certain routes. Day 6 to 7. Coin toss. This is the coin toss that will determine whether this week is just a tale or a headline in history. If the sun is gentle, we will crawl through. Auroras everywhere, chaotic navigation, battered satellites, increased radiation for passengers and crew, temporarily strained power grids. It is disruptive, costly, unforgettable, but survivable. Mars appears next to Earth, a layered data graph. What happens in 7 days is not like what happens in 7 million years. Look at Mars, a world that lost its global magnetic field long ago. Subjected to the solar wind for billions of years, its atmosphere has thinned, water has escaped into space, and the surface has become harsh. Earth's atmosphere is thicker and richer. Our gravity and chemistry provide stability. In a week, the oceans do not flow into space, but we will get a preview of how much the sun can intensify. Looking back at Lechamp, geological records show that the magnetic field has weakened to only a small fraction of its strength. The increase in cosmic rays may have altered ozone and slightly impacted the climate, the biosphere, in complex ways. Humanity still survives, but not without consequences. Today, the level of exposure in society has changed, not only the body, but also the electronic nervous system that stretches across the planet and reaches into orbit. The shield returns and the review. At the end of the week, the machine deep within the Earth beats its familiar rhythm again. The magnetic field stretches from the ground to the sky. The Van Allen belt is full again. The auroras retreat to the north and south, returning to their own stages. The compass returns to order. Animals gradually find their magnetic maps again. The radio improves as the ionosphere becomes less noisy. Radiation at low orbit gradually decreases to baseline. Stratospheric chemistry needs a few weeks to a few months to stabilize. UV warnings decrease. The thermosphere, after a week of being battered by particles, continues to expand. Satellite drag remains persistently high. Some low satellites fall earlier than planned. The transformer is damaged. If a solar storm strikes, it will take months to replace. The community struggles to memorize its own power grid map. Flycam. Slow over a city at dawn. The aurora fades like a bruise. Children gaze up at the sky. Between Earth and life, there's a silent covenant. The planet spins. The core stirs. A magnetic curtain stretches. The sun breathes. And beneath it all, we create the story, the vessel, the power lines, and the dreams. Most of the time, that covenant is invisible. A week without it would reveal how fragile the margins are. This is not a prophecy, this is a lens. It shows us where to focus. Reinforce the power grid before the GIC flow. Invest in space weather forecasting as we invest in hurricane tracking. Design satellites with margins, shielding, and fuel sufficient for unexpected drag. Protect the crew in orbit and passengers in the air with clear procedures. And never confuse invisible with unimportant. Montage: Solar telescope monitoring the corona, the power grid team installing mitigation equipment, engineers testing satellite circuits, pilots learning a new flight route. If one day the sky above your hometown turns blue, remember, we are protected by forces that cannot be touched. The week of the Silent Shield will be brilliant, dangerous, and unforgettable. And when the magnetic field returns, we will look up differently, grateful, wiser, and more prepared for a beautiful universe, because it is always alive.